Today we're joined by someone who lives and breathes the hospitality world at the very highest level, Graziano Arricale. If you've ever sipped a martini at Langan's, dined at one of the effortless chic Chuck's restaurants, or sweated it out at the ultra high-end Kicks, or stepped into a number of London's most iconic venues, chances are Graziano's influence was at play. He's a restaurateur, a brand builder, a master of experience, someone who understands the true hospitality isn't just about food or service, but the feeling you leave with. Over the years, he's helped shape some of the most prestigious and stylish spots in London, reviving legendary spots, launching new iconic venues, and setting the bar, pun intended, for what the modern luxury hospitality really looks like. Today, we're going deep into legacy, leadership, reinvention, and what it takes to keep the magic alive in a world that's constantly changing. Graz, welcome. This has been a little bit in the making, but we're here now, so let's get into it. There's somewhere that me and Julian love to start, which is the beginning, the beginning of your journey in hospitality. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about how you first got into hospitality, how you fell in love with this ever-changing industry.
Well, it's a bit of a sort of family affair, really. So my father came over from Naples in the 60s with his father, my grandfather, who was a chef. So it's a sort of generational thing. My father went into the meat supply side of the business. My dad was one of 5 brothers, all of them entrepreneurs, all sort of self-made men. And 2 of the other brothers also got into the food industry as well. So one uncle was a cheese importer, so mozzarella. He was one of the first guys to sort of fly mozzarella in from Naples multiple times a week. When it was, mozzarella was still quite exotic. I mean, you've got it everywhere now, but fresh Neapolitan mozzarella wasn't that common when he started. And then another uncle was who's also my godfather, was in the restaurant business. So he used to own a restaurant in Belsize Park called The Orchard in the 80s, and then he became part of a Etrusca group, which was a family friends group that they merged, and they ran about 5 or 6 restaurants in London.
Wow.
So my start was, I guess, inevitable. My father, sort of typical first generation immigrant, wanted his children all professionals, doctors, lawyers, architects, and he got 1 out of 3. So I'm one of 3 children. Okay. My older sister is a lawyer, so he got that one. That ticked the box. And then my brother and I both sort of gravitated towards hospitality. Wow. My brother sort of split out into property development now, but cut his teeth in the restaurant business. And then I sort of stayed the course and did the restaurant side of things. But my father was quite adamant that if I wanted to do, he tried his best to dissuade me. So I used to go and work on his vans, delivering meat at like 2-3 in the morning, going to Smithfield Market when I was on holiday from school. Brilliant. And I think it was a kind of a test. It was a way of him to see if I was, trying to cop out. I think he was worried that I just saw it as an easy route. My family do it, go into the business, have an easy life kind of thing. So I think he was very good at sort of opening my eyes early on, making sure that it was something I genuinely wanted to do rather than fell into. And then he insisted that I did it formally in terms of my education as well. So when I finished my A-levels, I had the choice either to go to Lausanne in Switzerland or Oxford Brookes in the UK. Right. So those are the 2 best schools. So Lausanne is the top hotel school and probably in the world, but it's based in Switzerland. And then Brookes, it was a very, very good hospitality school in the UK, probably the best. And I'd just spent 2 years in North Yorkshire at boarding school, so I didn't fancy being in Switzerland. So I chose Oxford Brookes and did a 4-year degree there. Brilliant. In hospitality with 1 year in industry. And then post that, I wanted to still stay in sort of the formal structure. So I went on to a management program with Conran Restaurants, with Sir Terence Conran's restaurant group. And I went on a sort of full year rotation around the restaurant called Le Pont de la Tour down near Tower Bridge. Right. Back in, God, now I was showing my age, back in 2005. And sort of took it from there, and I really enjoyed the structure. I think it was very good for me. I think if I'd have tried to do it any other way, I don't think I would have learnt in such a formal way, all the bits that I needed to know to progress as quickly as I did.
Wow, that's so interesting, because Julian, we haven't heard that a lot in terms of entrepreneurs' journeys into hospitality.
Especially family based as well.
Yeah, sort of people kind of fall into it, or they sort of maybe become like a promoter or working somewhere, and then they get into it that way. But that's fascinating that you sort of, really dedicate yourself to sort of putting the building blocks in. Yeah,
my father, I think, just always been very, very pro-education. He just, he believed in it, very strongly, and I think his idea is, if you're going to do something, then take it seriously, as you would if you wanted to train to be a lawyer or a doctor. Like, why should it be any different? If you want to, run businesses and be a successful businessman, you need to learn your craft, and if there are avenues to stay in education longer and learn more, then I think that's a benefit. I mean, that being said, there's also the other side of the coin where you can say that the sort of exuberance of youth and the kind of the inexperience is part of the positives of being a young entrepreneur. You're not scared of anything. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. Yep.
You just throw yourself into it and figure it out as you go. And I think that there's also something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, well, that's why it's great having you on the show, right? Because people like you and others can actually help the younger generation who are coming through in hospitality sort of maybe not make some of those mistakes, or maybe think about a different way to sort of get that same result. So yeah, that's exactly why we started the show, right, Jules?
That's right.
Which is amazing. And in terms of kind of the sort of journey, obviously you kind of started off in that sort of higher end sort of part of hospitality. Like, when did you sort of feel, wow, like, this is incredible, this feels like the creme de la creme? Was there ever that moment that you felt that?
Yeah, I think the reason I sort of was encouraged to go in sort of at the top end, in quote marks, of the industry was a conscious decision as well. And again, that was some very good advice from my father and other friends in the industry, which was always that go in at the highest level you can stomach, because you can always take the steps down later. So if you've learned how to do it in the best environment at the highest level, if then later on you want to go into something that's a bit more casual, a bit more relaxed, you've still got the skills and the background to do that, whereas it's very hard to go the other way around. So that was always sort of in my mind. But in terms of when I really thought that I was involved with something special, it's probably the reopening of Annabel's, which was an absolutely huge project. So I worked for Richard Caring for about 7 years, 7 years in total. And 4 of those years was dominated by the relocation and relaunch of Annabel's, which at the time was probably the most famous members club in the world. And I think when you're sort of stood there in a venue that you've worked in, you've lived and breathed in, and you're watching, for example, Lady Gaga on the piano, singing live. It's like that's a sort of a bit of a pinch yourself moment. It's you do suddenly realise that you're involved in something very, very special, and also sort of creating history. There's the old Annabel's had, tons of history. It opened in 1963. Everyone had been there. It's the only nightclub the Queen had ever been to. So it was a huge, huge brand, and has so much legacy and history to it. But it felt that at that moment that we were adding to that rather than just sort of living off it. We were creating our own legacy on our own history.
Yeah, and I love that, because I used in the introduction the word legacy, and that's exactly why I sort of felt right, because some of the venues you've been involved in, running and leading, they are like iconic, and the people that have stepped in those venues, and to hear the Queen, that's the first and maybe only club that the Queen's been to, is phenomenal.
That's brilliant.
I love that. Cool, and then take us on to sort of post Annabel's, like where did your sort of journey take you from there?
Yeah, so I think we probably skipped a bit. So post Conran Restaurants, that's when I sort of worked my way up through to GM, and at that point I wanted to become sort of a multi-site operator. So I'd always had this ambition to work my way up to the kind of CEO ownership sort of level. Brilliant. So having managed various restaurants in Conran Restaurants, which became D&D London, whilst I was there. That's when I was headhunted to go and join the Burley Clubs, which was Harry's Bar George, Mark's Club, Bath and
Nice.
Rackets, which was a squash and
Yeah.
gym sort of members club, and obviously Annabel's. And so I joined them as an operations manager spread across the 5 businesses.
Yeah.
And my job, that was the first time I took the step from very much floor-based, service-based, into more of the, the mechanics of running the business. So my major sort of win and my role at Burley was to sort of modernise it. So Richard Caring bought Burley, and it was very much run as a kind of family business.
Yeah.
It had systems, but it was very much pen and paper.
Right.
Very, very old school and very charming in its own way. But there were there's huge ambition for the group.
Yeah.
And that required everything to be systemized and structured and measured even. And so a lot of what I did was putting in, sounds boring, talking about it's not the glamorous side of the business, but like rota management, payroll management, making sure our margins were accurate, ensuring we were compliant across the business, from a health and safety point of view, food safety, and then just basically running the P&L. And that period of time, it was about 2 or 3 years, we saw huge improvements in the performance of the business in terms of its bottom line, purely by being more organised, being aware of what we're spending money on and the costs. Right. So I think that period of my career was very, almost like spreadsheet focused for a little while. Obviously still very much focusing on service and quality, but I was surrounded by excellent restaurateurs. You had Luciano at Harry's Bar, had Danny at George, Darius at Mark's Club. These were really, really top guys, club directors that really know their stuff. Right. So you didn't have to worry so much about that side of things. But what I did worry about was the profitability of the businesses in that period. And then that led on to the whole Annabel's project, which was a 4-year project, listed building. Once the lease was signed, it was a huge amount of work, and lots of new people joining the team as well. That's when a chap called Guillaume Glieper, who had just opened Chiltern Firehouse for Andre Balage, he joined on board with Louis Simoes, who was the head of bars at Chiltern. He became head of bars at Burley. So it was a bit like a kind of Avengers Assemble moment. And lots of big characters and big guys in the industry all coming together to open a £65 million business. And it was a huge undertaking, and going through that with that group of people, it's you create lifelong contacts and friends. And so I'm still close with everyone that was involved in that project, and we're all in the trenches together. And sort of grinding our way towards that opening. And so once I'd opened Annabel's, I was at a point in my career that I wanted to be more than an employee. I wanted to have ownership in the brands that I was running or influencing. And it was at that point that I met my current investor. And found my current role. And so I now work with him. He has majority stake in all the businesses that I run, but then there's also other investors involved as well. But he and I have a very, very close relationship in terms of running the brands that we've got, but also identifying new brands. And that's where the word legacy comes up a lot. He's a huge believer in brands. And the buying the right brand and the putting the right management together with the right brand is a recipe for success. And he's done that in other areas, not just in hospitality. I focus obviously mainly in hospitality and leisure, but he does the same thing across the board in lots of different sectors. Right. And so that's when I joined, I took on Chuck's straight away. At that time we had was it 5 or 6 sites. This was in 2018, so pre-COVID.
So we can say it on the show. The C word is allowed.
I must say, I bet everyone's anyone that's done anything in the business for the last 10 years, your career is almost defined or split by COVID. You've got what happened before, what happened afterwards. Right. And it must be interesting seeing how everyone dealt with it. So I came into a business pre-COVID where good trading sites with Chuck's, and then I concentrated on Chuck's for a couple of years, and then I was looking after the F&B side of Kicks, which is our members' gym with a gym, spa, and restaurant. And so after looking after the restaurant there in 2020, I took over that business in its entirety as CEO, as well as Kicks U, which is the sister brand.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I then had these 3 brands that I was looking after. And so I was made CEO of Kicks U in January 2020. Spent 2 or 3 months putting together these grand plans for what I was going to do with these businesses and how I was going to improve them and drive them forward. And then 3 months later they were shut. So it was quite. To be honest, actually, it was a scary time. It was the first time actually in my career where I'd hit a problem. A road bump. And I guess I've been very lucky up until then. Every job I'd gone into, I'd seemed to do reasonably well at, and I progressed well up through the ranks in all the companies I worked for, and I just felt like I had this sort of steady march towards where I wanted to get, and all of a sudden, the whole industry was shut down, and that was my first, I think, real reality check that it's not always plain sailing. It's not always life doesn't always go up and onwards, and so it was a real eye-opener, and I feel I was incredibly lucky to be involved with the people I was involved with at the time. Because I think we were incredibly supported by our investors. There was a point where I had to have the frank conversation. Like, is this it? Are we done? And it was like, no, don't be silly. These are opportunities, and we battened down the hatches. We did our numbers, made our plans. We looked after the staff as well, which I think we were probably one of the only real sort of groups that looked after our staff to the level that we did. And that then brought a lot of loyalty post COVID, when everyone was trying to steal each other's staff. Because we went straight out of COVID into a staff shortage in our industry, and so we survived that well because we'd been so loyal to our team, and they stuck with us. But as my investor said, these situations create opportunities, and one of those opportunities was Langan's, which was a post-COVID acquisition, the sort of business we'd never would have been able to buy unless these certain circumstances came about, and that was an interesting time as well. You go from thinking that's the end, everything's done, and then you straight out of it into acquiring one of the most famous restaurants in the country.
Totally.
So it was a real roller coaster.
Amazing.
But it's like a roller coaster with a lot of opportunities at the end. Anyway, it'd be great to know about Langan. How did you actually knock the deal? Because a lot of people would be like, how did you pull that off?
That's
can you tell us how the stages, how you got because the listeners will be interested. How do you got such a great space as well?
So I actually used to get out of the tube at Green Park to go to my office in Berkeley Square when I worked for Richard. So Langan's had always been on my radar because I just loved it as a site. It's sort of ground level, very high footfall area. You've got big open windows. You can always see it's busy inside. I love the neon, the red neon signage outside. And for years I used to walk past it, and I always used to daydream to myself, like, if that ever came up, I'd love to buy it. What a great restaurant to run. So much potential. And then it was just an opportunity that we pounced on. I had several agents contact me saying that the business was in trouble. They were looking to assign the lease, and so the only way you get a hold of a business like Langan's as a business, you have to obviously buy the business, and for us buying the business was the IP, the license, and the lease. If the company had completely collapsed, the landlord would have taken it back. They would have sold it for a premium, and it would have just been a completely new thing, and Langan's would have died. So for us, it was about getting in and doing a deal with the owner. The ownership of the brand and the business, and to buy it effectively as a going concern. It had gone through, not to get into too much detail, but it had gone already through a lot of restructuring in terms of they, part of the issue to them selling it previously, so they'd already tried to sell it, but there was a lot of debt in the business, a lot of liabilities that people were a bit sort of shy of. And the ownership had gone through cleaning up the business, preparing it for a sort of cleaner sale or administration. And so we got in there just before. There were 10 bids on the property. We were the only ones that were keeping the brand. Every other bidder was an alternative brand, wanting to put in something completely different. I think one was a high-end steak operator. Another one was a Mykonos based brand.
Okay, right.
So it was going to be something totally different and not Langan's. And we really loved the brand, loved the history, and so we drove really hard on that. And I think ultimately it was just fortunate. We just got in there very quickly. We produced the funds very quickly, put a business plan together, and I think the landlord saw how much we loved the brand and how serious we were about it. And I think that landlord saw value in Langan's remaining in that building. Ultimately it's a positive for their asset. It's a landmark. If you exit the tube in Green Park and go up to the exit where Langan's is, on the exit board where it says Berkeley Square, Mayfair, and then Langan's. So, I don't know many restaurants that are on are on the tube signs on the directions, and it's that iconic.
Totally.
And so. Yeah, I think that was a sort of the role, the sort of the way it all sort of unfolded, but it was very quick. Things go slowly and then very quickly. So it was a couple of weeks of getting our ducks in a row, doing investor decks, raising the money, doing some budgets, doing some fit out estimates, having chatting up the landlord, keeping them interested. And then all of a sudden, it was like, right, the deal's going to get done in the next 48 hours, and that was thrilling, and really exciting. And my investor, actually, I was at Kicks, which was closed at the time because gyms weren't allowed to open. You weren't allowed to work out indoors at the time. As crazy as
when
it sounds.
When you go back to it, you think,
it was mad. So my main investor had just been working out in his empty gym by himself, which is probably quite nice.
Yeah, I was going to say he's probably missing those days now.
Exactly. And he sort of strolled into the restaurant, and we'd just done the deal, and I had the pleasure. It's very rare, I think, in life outside sort of sport and kind of armed conflict, when you actually get the thrill of a win, a genuine win. And I think in modern society, I think you miss that. And once you leave school and you leave competitive sports and all that sort of thing, those wins are much more spread out and fewer and far between. And this was a moment that was an actual win. I got to tell him we got it. It's ours.
That's phenomenal. I mean, you know what? Just to see people like live their dreams is what this show's all about, and I think you said, sort of imagine that feeling of walking past Langan's. I was there Friday night, so I walked past it, and it's so iconic. It hits you straight away as soon as you come out of Green Park. Like, can you talk to us about the feeling? So you talked about Annabel's, you talked just briefly about the feeling of getting that win. Can you talk about what that actually feels like? Because we've interviewed DJs and MCs and club owners, festival owners, and they talk about this feeling, this adrenaline rush that you get from playing to a packed venue or doing something you've never done before. Can you just tell our listeners about that feeling?
I think it's something every restaurateur that's passionate about what they do, they do get a buzz off a busy dining room. And it's interesting you mentioned sort of performing artists, musicians. It's probably quite similar. Although probably we're a lot less talent than can't play guitar. But if you think walking into Langan's in the middle of December, we've got these lunches that start at sort of 11:30 in the morning, and go all the way through till midnight. It's a completely incredible thing to behold. You walk into your business at lunch, and every table's packed all the way through until you close. But walking through a large restaurant like Langan's, we can have about up to 160, 170 people in at any given time. And there's a certain noise of a happy, busy restaurant. And it's very different to a busy restaurant where you're not getting it right. I must say, it's subtle, but I was always taught when I was a floor manager and a maitre d' and sort of on the floor, when you look at tables, what you want to see is everyone's heads facing each other. That means everyone's engaged with their guests. They're talking, they're enjoying themselves, and they're focused on on themselves. It's when you see people looking around, that's when something's wrong. They either want attention from the waiter, or they're disinterested in their evening, or not impressed by their food. And so, you know, walking through a restaurant, there's all these sort of non-verbal cues that your diners and guests are giving you. And walking through a very busy restaurant with that right hubbub, the background noise, and you know, people that are clearly enjoying themselves. It is a buzz. You can't get away from that.
That's amazing. I know what you mean. You know when there's music on in a restaurant, but you're having such a good time, you don't even like listen to the music. That's an interesting feeling. There's something you said about the floor and sort of, I suppose, the building blocks to being a CEO and a successful entrepreneur. How important do you personally think, sort of, you know, had the training wheels on and being on the floor and understanding, you know, those cues that you just described? How important is that, do you think, to being a successful CEO and entrepreneur in, you know, the hospitality industry?
I mean, it's an interesting question because, you know, I think it's critical, but then, you know, you could probably find a load of CEOs that run great businesses having never done the thing that they run. You know, I don't know if you imagine a guy, you know, running an automotive plant, you know, has he ever, you know, done any panel beating or ever built a car? Probably not, but he runs a very successful company. So I mean, I know what I personally think and what works for me, and that is, I feel like I need to understand the business I run, but understand it intimately. I genuinely did start from the bottom. You know, my first jobs in hospitality were mopping floors, you know, polishing cutlery, you know, cleaning, polishing glasses. And then, you know, I had the honour of getting promoted onto the floor where I got to lay tables and change tablecloths, and as a chef de rang. And I grew up in the business through a, you know, French brigade system, which is very structured. It's a bit sort of military structure. So, you know, commies have a certain job. They don't talk to the guests. They don't touch anything unless they're told to. They carry food. They make the coffee. They polish cutlery and plates and glasses. And then you move on to the floor as a chef de rang. Then you get to have some interaction with guests. You get to take the dessert order. You get to clear tables. You don't get to serve food, though. You don't get to take orders. And then, you know, you've got all these sort of roles. You go up to head waiter, then all of a sudden you're actually, you know, doing something interesting. And then, you know, you have a section. You are, you know, the sort of, we were always taught a head waiter runs his section like a manager of your own personal restaurant. Like, that's your restaurant. You make it perfect. Don't worry about everyone else. Just do your section. And I think that sort of that very structured way of learning was good for me, because I didn't go too quickly. I went quick enough, but I learned every stage and moved on to the next. And even though I progressed through all of that relatively quickly, I never forgot those lessons and that grounding. And I think it helps me now as a CEO, because, you know, I can sit in budget meetings with GMs, and you know, they can try and say all sorts of all sorts of codswallop, and the advantages that I've done it. You know, I've been there, I've done it. And so, you know, even recently in a budget meeting, we were looking at our bottom line. We weren't quite happy with it. So looking for lots of opportunities throughout the P&L to improve the business. And, you know, obviously, guys sometimes are, you know, happy in their lane and they're doing well, and they think they're doing well enough, and I want more, and they, you know, they're comfortable. But it's my job to get more. And absolutely. And if I can say, you know, look at a line on the P&L and say, right, you've got to save 10% on this, you know, and I know it's possible, and there's a bit of pushback, I need to have the confidence and the knowledge and the experience to say this is doable. It needs to be done.
Love that.
And so I think that's where maybe hospitality is quite unique in that sense, where, you know, it helps having done it from the ground up. Makes
a big difference.
And I'm sure that, you know, it will be true in a lot of industries, but I think it's very true in hospitality.
And I feel that. I mean, my business that I built outside of hospitality was in media. But, you know, I did all of the basic level jobs, and it allowed me, as I scaled up and built my own business, to know what it takes. And the BS factor is real, you know. Salespeople couldn't BS me.
Because you know,
was one of those salespeople that had all the BS.
Wrote the book.
Right, exactly. So no, I love hearing that.
Story.
For sure.
But do you feel like the waiter service and everything is the same as it was before COVID, or do you reckon there's improvements that can be made?
I think it's definitely changed. I think that's more macroeconomic, though, to be honest. So, for example, when I started my career in 2005 at Le Pont de la Tour, that was a very old school traditional French brasserie, sort of what we call a brasserie de luxe. So it wasn't fine dining; it was sort of French bourgeois, brasserie food, but it was at a sort of very elevated level of service. So we used to make the steak tartare at the table. We used to bone the Dover sole at the table. We used to do crêpes Suzette, things like that. So it was very labour intensive. But you've got to remember back then. I can't even remember what national minimum wage was, but it was it was probably half what it was now. I think was it like 5-6 quid or something.
Yeah.
Right. You also had completely different rules around service charge and tronc, which some people abuse, but not in the case I'm talking about now. But it was a different tool back then, and you could use it in a different way. So what that meant was you could have a lot more bodies on the floor, because it was cost effective to do so, and the price point we were charging, the numbers
made sense.
Balanced better. And I would say post COVID, we've got this issue where we've had national minimum wage going up every single year. This NI increase that came in is a real killer. I think is a really poor policy. Not to get too much into politics, but I think it was incredibly anti-business, anti-shops.
Sure.
It effectively just immediately put up all of our payroll costs.
Right.
And what a restaurant's going to do, we're already squeezed on utilities.
Absolutely.
Rents go only one way. In most leases. The electricity prices post-Ukraine went up. Rates relief ended. So it's just it's not one thing, it's lots of things. And what a restaurateur is supposed to do, we can't just not react. So obviously in the industry as a whole, what's happened is either you get lower quality staff for cheaper.
That's right.
Or you reduce the steps of your service. So some places are taking away intricate tableside service because it's just not feasible in today's environment.
Right.
So it is an interesting one, and I think you could argue that service may, on the whole, have taken a dip post-COVID because it was just so disruptive. People got out of their rhythm. Diners got out of the habit of dining out. Waiters got out of the habit of serving people. But I think also providing good service and true, genuine hospitality. If you want to be true and warm, you've got to be happy in your work as a service provider, as a waiter or a maitre d' or as a floor manager or a sommelier. And I think the stresses that cost of living have introduced, the stresses of the whole COVID era, that must affect people's ability to put the smile on at the beginning of every shift. And so it's our job as restaurateurs to make people that work for us happy and motivated and excited, and that's something our teams do very well.
Oh, brilliant.
We try to look after our teams very well financially, but it's not just about the money. It's about people feeling comfortable and confident in their workplace, which enables them to deliver real hospitality.
Wow. So do you have like a magical formula to your business, to scale it, because a lot of people try to scale their business in other countries and stuff, but not successful. But you seem to get the right people in the right places, right investors. Can you tell us, is there like a formula to it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was. I'd be a very rich man.
There's people getting out their notepad right now.
This is where we add the subscription model. You want to know the secret?
That's it.
I think actually touched upon some of the points actually in the question itself. So it's people, I think, is critical. Right. So I think the first step is obviously having the brand or the brand that has the potential to become what you want it to become. Sometimes you take on brands with an eye for the future. Sometimes you take on brands that are already what you want them to be. But then, I think people are critical. So as a CEO in my role, what I can't do is get constantly sort of dragged down into operations. As much as I love it, that's not my job anymore. you know, my job is to steer the business and you know, deliver value for shareholders, deliver growth, you know, give the vision, the future of the brands. And so, you know, every time I'm sort of stepping down from that to deal with sort of operational issues or issues that my team below me should be boxing off and dealing with, that obviously takes me away from the real role. So very, very good people throughout the organisation is critical. I think having a vision as well is also, you know, a plan, a roadmap, you know, to where you want to get to is also, you know, fundamental. And then, you know, there's other ingredients that, you know, the right backers, you know, people that believe in you, that are willing to put their money where their mouth is, willing to, so, you know, we have this term, swing the bat, you know, which is, you know, if you're going to do something, then go for it. Don't pull your punch. And so, you know, there's a lot going on at the moment in Kicks specifically as a business. You know, we've got a business, we've got a club in New York in progress in the Upper East Side. You know, 1 block away from Central Park, beautiful location. We're looking at going into a JV with the landlord.
Oh, amazing!
And opening a full Kicks in New York. And so again, that, you know, what we're doing now is it's about people, not only people that work for us, but people that are going to join this club. So a lot of what we're doing at the moment is identifying members. We're looking at doing a pre-sale for lifetime membership.
Brilliant.
To get the core of the club, the culture of the club set, and get the right people in. And then there's a huge amount of work on recruitment stateside to get the right people in the right roles, and then set that business up for success.
Is Kicks similar to like a third space, but with a restaurant, or would you say it's more like a high-end restaurant with a I don't know, what sort of setup would you say it was?
So that's a good question, because we've actually moved the perception of the business over time. So when I joined in 2020, one thing I noticed straight away, so coming from a members club background, one thing I noticed straight away was it was run like a gym, and the members treated it like a gym. And so if you imagine how, you know, you or I would respond to a gym, you know, you're going on holiday in August, I'm not going to the gym, I pause my membership, I start it in September. And I was sat there thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? You know, this is a club. You know, if you're a member, you're a member. And I didn't have people in Annabel's calling me saying, I'm going on holiday next week. Can you pause my membership? I mean, it just didn't happen. So I mean, I guess I was maybe slightly naive to it, because it was the first time I'd run a gym of that size. You know, I'd been involved in Bath and Rackets in Burley, which was a squash club and a gym, but it was a small club with 300 members. But I just immediately thought, you know, we've got a perception problem here, because I've got so Kicks is a restaurant, full service restaurant, a spa, sort of a medical aesthetic spa.
Brilliant.
So very, very high level, with great therapists and doctors and amazing treatment menu, and then a great gym, and a club room for sort of meetings and sort of reading the papers and whatnot. And I sort of took a look around, and I thought, no, we can't run this as a gym, because it's so much more than that. You know, this is a club. It's a members club. And so for the next few years, everything that we were doing in terms of positioning the business and perception was about members and community. So we started doing, actually, funnily enough, it seems like an innocuous thing, but one of the most successful things we did was introduce a members party, 2 members parties a year, a summer party, winter party, completely complimentary. Just pack the place with champagne, live music, DJ, caviar all over the place. Just say to everyone, come along, have a good time on us. So thank you for being part of our club. And the first party we did, I think we got about 70, 80 members to it. The summer party just gone, I think we had 380 members, which is, you know, we cap our membership at 1,000 members. So that's almost 40% turnout for a party. And so these parties sort of gathered momentum. And what it's done is it's brought the members together outside of the environment of the day-to-day. You know, so instead of seeing someone in the gym nodding at someone on a treadmill or passing someone in the corridor, we got them together and fed them champagne.
That's good.
And it's a great way of getting people to socialise. And I think what that ended up doing was starting to build those community sort of feelings around membership. People started having, you know, even more pride in being a member.
Right.
We got a lot more referrals from people,
Brilliant.
bringing in their friends, and I think we just changed the perception of the club in that sense, and I think that has helped a lot. So we've gone from a gym to a members club that has a gym, a restaurant, and a spa.
Right.
So we just flipped the script a little bit.
I love the words you were using there, like socialize and community. You know, like that should be the embodiment of membership, and actually networking probably takes place at those parties you do. Business probably happens, and actually, if you start looking at the ROI of that membership, it's probably not that expensive, really, when you think about it, because of the sort of ability to meet like-minded people in that community and socialise, which that's one thing COVID taught us all. Like, if you're a people person, you like people, you're going to miss those moments of socialising. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to jump into a segment we call the quick fire round.
Oh, wow.
That's never really quick, is it?
Not really.
We would try, but it just never is quite quick. So you can incriminate here, or you could not. And don't be a politician and sit on the fence. So I'm going to hit you with the first question. Obviously, you've worked in some unbelievable places, but like, who would you say is the biggest party animal celebrity that you've seen, had in one of your venues? Because wow, there's definitely some names that come through. Annabel's and Langan's.
I mean, I think we had a huge party for Drake at Annabel's once, which I think
I remember
that was a big one.
2014.
Yeah.
And
it was there we go.
Party
but
that's another show, right?
It was one of those parties that just sort of completely took over the whole club. You know, he brought his whole entourage, even his own security, and that was a big party that went on for a while.
Man City, had quite a lot of footballers there. It was very big. I remember that one.
Yeah. I would say them. Yeah, there's a couple of that was kind of a small intimate gig, so that was very cool.
That's cool.
I mean, but that was also cool because then we had people like Adele attending as well, and so it wasn't just about Lady Gaga performing; it was also about the audience that we curated as well.
Wow,
that was a really interesting one.
Love that.
Yeah, we did so many parties at Annabel's. I mean, pre-opening we wanted to do this sort of hard hat Halloween party on the scaffolding. So we had like people dressed like zombies on scaffolding.
Wow.
Richard Herring was like dressed up like a werewolf on the back of a Harley doing laps of Berkeley Square. It was bonkers.
Wow.
And we put a roller coaster in the basement, like a pop-up roller coaster, like a kind of ghost train. So those sorts of parties were really cool as well. Like not around specific celebrities, but just in terms of like parties that were so over the top and beyond what was normal.
It creates the whole atmosphere.
It's just pure PR as well.
Yeah.
You know, everyone. These parties became quite sort of famous, and then we hadn't even opened the club yet. So, you know, it's that kind of building of anticipation.
Yeah.
You know, that pre-opening.
I love that.
PR.
Yeah. No, great. It's great to see that creativity and being able to just create noise and hype and get people excited. Alive or dead? I know you're a big cook, so I'm going to change this from just drinks, or dine with. So, alive or dead, what celebrity would you love to have an intimate drink or dinner with?
I think there's quite a few. I think I always liked
a dinner table.
Yeah, Anthony Bourdain was always an interesting character.
Right.
I mean, I read his book Kitchen Confidential very, very early on in my career, so that was quite formative for me. I mean, I read that book and thought, wow, this is like rock and roll.
Right.
Like, you know, this is going to be cool. Obviously, he was writing about an era that doesn't exist anymore. But I found him very interesting.
Nice.
There's a chap called Danny Myers as well who wrote a book called Setting the Table, which was gifted to me by my first general manager, Giuseppe De Waal at Le Pont de la Tour, who's now actually the director at Annabel's. So it's, you know, it's a small world. We're all very close. But he gifted me this book, Setting the Table, and that I think was very formative in giving me a very early sort of sense of conviction over what I believed hospitality to be, and I you know, I very much resonated with what he was saying.
Yeah.
that book was very influential on my outlook on hospitality. So yeah, Danny Meyer would be a great guy to have supper with. And then otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I've always been fascinated by JFK, which is a random one. I think he was he was a fascinating guy, but also, you know, lived in probably my favourite period of history. You know, 20th century history was such an interesting period of time, and his life was fascinating.
Yeah,
so, you know,
definitely.
I definitely would love to pick his brain.
A lot of stories about him.
I was going to say, you definitely need to take all phones away and make sure that one's undercover. Amazing. Okay, and then is there kind of like a club experience or hospitality experience that you look at and go, wow, I really respect what they've built and what they've created that you wish you would have created?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, Soho Farmhouse, when it first opened, I thought was maybe visionary is a strong word, but it was, you know, it was very much leading the pack. I remember when I first heard about it. So Richard, who I used to work for, used to be a shareholder in the Soho House Group back then, and so I kind of was exposed to this concept sort of quite early on, and it genuinely kind of blew my mind because, you know, if you think about the UK, so go to a period of time pre-Soho Farmhouse, what did you have in this country in terms of a country club? You had golf clubs, you had Butlins, I mean, you know, Centre Parks, and it's like, you know, it's amusing, but it is true. There was nothing like it. And what they did was completely, you know, first to market and totally rewrote the book on what membership can look like outside of cities. And so if you think members clubs always started out in Mayfair, you know, they go back hundreds and hundreds of years. But it was always a kind of West End Mayfair thing, and it was often, you know, they were often quite stuffy, lots of rules, you know, often men only back then, and sort of grouped around occupations, but occupations like, you know, sort of lawyers and bankers and whatever. So if you fast forward to when Soho Farmhouse was conceived, this was basically kind of American country club sort of thing, but done under the Soho brand in the Cotswolds, and I think they absolutely nailed it. And it has been a huge success. And obviously, it's been so successful now. Other people got involved. You know, Estelle Manor, and you know, there's other people entering that sort of market. But yeah, I think that was a really impressive one.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. If there's anybody you could collaborate in the world with, a brand, a creative, a fellow entrepreneur, is anyone you'd love to sort of partner up with and do a project with?
I mean, we do already do quite a few collaborations. In terms of people we'd like to collaborate with, it would be, I mean, someone like Laura Piana, I think as a brand, is a great brand. You know, very, very high end, understands its market. You know, it's a brand that really resonates with a certain niche. And they've absolutely nailed it. So I think something like Laura Piana would be an interesting sort of collab for something like Kicks, because they're both sort of in the same sort of field of that kind of very high end luxury. You know, in Langan's we do lots of collaborations with lots of drinks brands, and that's, you know, that's Langan. So you know, champagne is a big thing. So we do lots of things like that. We do Halloween parties with sponsorship from like Casamigos and things like that. And so we do a lot of work with drinks brands there.
Love it. All right. Well, you survived quickfire, which I promised you would not be quickfire. So time for a bit of incrimination on yourself potentially. You know, one thing we know about hospitality, we've had a few nights out as well ourselves. So, what's the Graz night out look like?
It's very different to what it used to look like, I think. I mean, what it used to look like when I used to work on the floor and, you know, was in the trenches with my colleagues. You know, it was a very different sort of environment. You know, younger guys, no kids, no mortgage, and you know, you get to the end of the shift, you might have worked, you know, 14, 15 hours, and then you get to closing and you close, and then all you can think about is, right, let's go get on it. And that's quite a quite an important part of hospitality culture, you know. And a lot of guys would finish shifts in Mayfair and then head straight into Soho, straight into bars, and and have a good time. Because often if you close as well, you're not opening the next day. So you've got this sort of nocturnal. Nocturnal hours, so
Nice.
you go out, you maybe go out till 3-4 in the morning, and then you wouldn't have to be in work if at all until 2-3 p.m. the next day. So you could sort of get away with it, and we were younger as well, so it took less toll. Nowadays very different. I like to go and go and eat out at the competition. I think it's obviously incredibly important to understand what people around you are doing. Keep your sort of your understanding of quality sort of fine-tuned as well. So it's interesting actually. The restaurants. I mean, it's probably always been this way, but hype is a big thing. I think probably amplified by social media and
of course.
Instagram and TikTok, places can sort of go viral and everyone's like, oh, you've got to go and eat this donut or whatever. I try to sort of stay away from that sort of stuff, but if I'm told repeatedly like this restaurant's good, you've got to check it out, I do it. And for me that's not only going out, it's work as well. It's keeping your sort of your finger on the pulse as to what's going on in your industry. So that's normally what going out looks like for me.
Nice
supper,
nice wine.
Nice wine. A nice evening out, and I don't go clubbing as much anymore.
Amazing. Another question I wanted to ask you actually, and I always ask everybody this, but one of the things we know about hospitality is anything and everything will go wrong at some point.
Oh God, yeah.
And life's a bit serious now, So one of the things we like to do for our listeners is just tell them about some funny stories of like where things have gone wrong. So can you tell us a few stories?
I mean, there's countless times.
Right.
One that comes to mind actually. There's a guy that works for me now called Eddie, who's the ops manager ops director for Chuck's. He and I first met when I got my first GM role.
Right.
I was only 25, and I got given the GM role at a restaurant called Almeida, which is opposite the Almeida Theatre in Islington. Yeah. And so my first gig, and then. About 6 months in, Eddie joined me from another business within the group, and it was the first time as a GM I'd been able to sort of delegate things that I didn't want to deal with, which was actually quite liberating. But we had one night, complete power cut in the middle of service. Whoa. And so we had to go around putting candles on the tables. Wow. And we had to sort of take everyone's details, and we lost all our PDQs. It's an absolute disaster. But it was the first time in my career that I managed to turn around to Eddie and just said to sort this out. Get around every table, get all their details. Luckily, they were only going over to the theatre, and the idea was hopefully the power comes back on, and then they can come in the intermission and pay. But I got to sort of delegate that to Eddie. So that was a bit of a trial. I think it was his first week. So
and you and Eddie are still friends. So that is good.
It still works. It still works with me. So it's like, obviously didn't put him off too badly. But I mean, that sort of thing happens all the time, and I think that's it's part and parcel. The hospitality is an interesting business because it's so live, and it's got so many different elements of different sorts of business and industry. You've got the whole, sort of almost fabrication side of things. You're taking raw ingredients, you're processing them into a finished product, in a live environment. So you've got production, but then you've also got front of house service, which is all soft skills and standards, and so and all of this is live. So people turn up, walk through the door, they sit down, you feed them, and they pay for it, and then they're gone, and that entire transaction's occurred in 2 hours. And it's like, imagine it if you look at that in any other industry, it's very different. You make your product somewhere in a purpose-built factory, it goes and sits in a warehouse, the customer buys it online, it gets posted to the house. So restaurants are a live, dynamic thing, and as a result, anything that goes wrong anywhere along that chain of production to service to paying, is terminal to a service. So,
absolutely.
I mean, power cuts are, one of those things. Having things not turn up is another one. So we've sometimes done a whole load of, we've done sort of large parties that require specialist sound equipment and things, and like the van, the truck delivering the speakers is broken down or something like that. So, it's a lot of scrabbling around and plan Bs and trying to fix things. But that's part of what makes it exciting as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant.
But I've got a question. How do you see the role of technology in the future of hospitality?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because it relies on two sides of the equation. So it's how much will the guest adopt, and then how much will the operator adopt and implement. I think technology's made huge strides already, as we've seen in social media. So marketing, PR, it's changed everything in that sense. So I think that's probably the early adoption of sort of what current technology into our industry. That's already bedded in and done. Like, everyone's on Instagram now. Everybody does content. So we started doing sort of behind the scenes filming in the kitchens. In Langan's, and that's we get like I think 500,000 views for our fish pie or something like that. And so it really works, and it gains real traction, and I think people like seeing behind the curtain as to what goes on in these businesses. I think AI is probably the big one, isn't it, that everyone's sort of looking at. I think it depends how it's utilized. I think it will be quite interesting in hospitality. There's areas where it can be utilized in other industries very simply. For example, my sister's a lawyer. She works with AI in terms of automating the contract process. So they've got they work with something called Harry, where the firms subscribe to this AI model, and it just basically does your contracts, and then a human checks it at the very end. So in a business like that, where law is very defined and very precise and binary in a sense, and so that makes complete sense. Like, how it gets implemented in a business that's so much about soft skills and people. If you want to take it to the complete extreme and just jump straight to the end, like robot waiters, what would that do to restaurants?
Weird.
There's no warmth, there's no there's no interaction, there's no human contact. So if you just go straight to the end, what's the sort of ultimate application of technology in the restaurant business? Then it would probably be something like that, like full automation, no human beings. And I think that's not a restaurant I want to run. And I don't know if it's a restaurant that people want to eat in. So it's about where do we use these tools in the right way to actually do something positive. And we were talking briefly before we started about an article I read in the paper about Bill's using AI to evaluate the emotional response their menus gave diners. So I think that sort of stuff is quite interesting. I think AI can do a lot in terms of back of house, like stock management, margin management, rota management. Getting AI to analyze your spend per hour in your business so that when you're not making money and when you shouldn't have staff on. I mean, you can already do that now, but if AI can do it for you, those are all benefits. So I think there's a lot of benefit that can be done behind the scenes. I just think we have to be very careful how it creeps into in between the human in between human contact. I don't think you want that in the way.
No, I agree. And I think humans, they like that first experience and the novelty of like a robot serving them a drink or food, but actually once you've done it, you've done it. And that's the beauty of humans. Anything can happen, which is kind of the magic, right? I remember being at Langan's, and obviously I'm with Graz, so the staff are amazing. But they're probably going to be a bit nervous serving Graz, but that was the magic of the lunch we had together, because they can say anything, they can do anything, and I think taking away the magic of human beings in service, I think you miss something personally.
Probably for emails or responding to customers, social media, probably. But no, someone making me a dish, I don't know. I'm not too sure about that.
I'd love to know about like how you stay sort of motivated and kind of high energy in such a fast-paced industry that's constantly changing. Have you got back to the magic that Julian was talking about earlier? Is there stuff that you have to do to stay sort of positive?
Yeah, I think as I've got older, I've sort of realised what, how important certain things are that you just completely ignore when you're younger. One of them being sleep, exercise,
right.
Your diet, and running a wellness club. It was a bit of a wake up call for me, because I, previously had a lifestyle that was just sort of 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I believed in. I still believe in very hard work, but I think I believed in a kind of slightly sadistic version of hard work. Like, I used to take pride in doing 70-hour weeks and being knackered, and I think when you're young, and also the way the industry was back then, it was kind of, that's what you had to do to progress, and you had to earn your stripes, and do the hard time, and suffer for your craft, and I think as I've got older, I've realised that one running a wellness club, you can't run a wellness club and not sort of walk the walk. You can't be an absolute mess. Breaking down, unfit, and with a terrible diet, and then ask people to listen to you when you're trying to sell them the vision of wellness. And so, I take sort of my health a lot more seriously now. In terms of the alcohol intake, sleep, making sure I'm in the gym, and prioritizing, being healthy. And I found that I'd say when I sort of approached 40 under my old sort of lifestyle before I sort of took this stuff seriously, I was finding myself, groggy. The late nights were, work were sort of taking its toll. I couldn't recover as quickly as I used to be able to. I wasn't as sort of sprightly and on it in the morning. And that actually has all changed with, with lifestyle changes. And so, working out, sleeping properly, eating well, limiting, alcohol has sort of helped me sort of have more energy now. And I think that's key, because things haven't slowed down. I work in a less physical way now, but I work under a lot more stress and pressure, and work obviously a lot with your mind. And so what keeps me motivated though is the next project, the next thing. I love a challenge. I love a target, a project. So New York for Kicks is incredibly exciting. The expansion in London that we've got plans. So we're looking at taking 2 units next door to the current Kicks.
Oh, brilliant! And
introducing a full sort of wet spa, introducing new treatment rooms, a hair and beauty offering, and doubling the size of the restaurant, and then refurbishing the rest of the club. So that's like a 2-year project. That's exciting. We've got these franchises in Bahrain for Kicks U, and Bahrain and Dubai. So there's always something going on. And I think if the minute you don't enjoy a new project, you're done, I guess. And so as long as I'm sort of still enjoying it, then we'll keep pushing.
Exciting. Love that.
It seems like Kicks is like the commercial brand that you're trying to promote the most. It's really good.
I think Kicks. So out of all the brands, I think you obviously have to think about where you put your energy. And my investor and partner in the businesses, he said something to me a few months ago, around businesses, and he said, don't be a busy fool. And what he meant by that is, don't throw yourself into something that's not going to give you the return. So if you've got a business that you love and it's a great brand, but it's not scalable, it doesn't have a future, then you should minimize the amount of time you expose yourself to that business, and focus on the ones that have got the growth potential. And so I would say, actually, for at least 5 years now, I've really believed in Kicks as a brand, as a concept, as a lifestyle brand, and I personally think it's the one that has got the ability to translate internationally. If you look at the people that are members of Kicks, they're a set that tend to sort of move around the same circles and the same places. And so I could easily name 4 cities that a Kicks could open in, and we would have a huge amount of crossover of membership from London. And so New York is one of them, Miami's one, Dubai in the last few years has really taken a huge amount of wealth out of London and taken it to Dubai. Milan potentially is another one. And so if you look at the scalability of a brand like that, and then if you were to fast forward, say 5-10 years, and say, right, if we ended up with a club in New York, club in Miami, a flagship in London, one in Dubai, all of a sudden you've got, you know, an international wellness brand.
Yeah.
And so that vision for me is very clear and very achievable. And so that's where I want to put most of my energy into making that happen.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's kind of interesting because also when you look at the data of younger generations, you know, they're not drinking as much. You know, they are, you know, wellness is a big part of how they engage and socialize and stuff. So it feels like your bet in the vision is quite a calculated, almost data-driven move. Would you say that's fair, or would you say it's more gut from?
No, I think I love the brand. So you know, there's definitely a gut feel in there.
Right.
But what you've said is actually absolutely spot on. You know, the way people socialize is changing.
Yeah.
You know, as we said off air just before we started, a friend of mine, Louis Blake, opening Long Lane.
Yeah.
So it's a great idea. It's basically a sort of a country wellness club and hotel, but no alcohol.
Right.
And they're doing everything from like looking at the, you know, the toxicity of the environment and removing all the plastics. There's no single-use plastic there. They use like things like structured water. The pool's like going to be like a natural pool, so no chlorine. Okay. So trying to reduce all the kind of contaminants in the environment, and so all of that's really interesting, and I think it is indicative of the way a lot of it's going. You know, and I think you're right. You know, younger generation that don't drink as much. They're not quite as hedonistic, I think, but you know, this stuff is cyclical, cyclical. You know, so this will, you know, this could all come back. You know, again, you know, then we might have a period of this sort of this generation being that way, and the next generation might be straight back into you know sort of crazy lifestyle. So you just never know. But I think ultimately, I you know, I believe in the brand you know, very strongly. It's a very well-run, well-proven brand in London. I think it will work incredibly well in other locations. So that's the gut part, but then, you know, that is definitely supported with the way things are going in general.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that fascinates me about different entrepreneurs that we've had on the show is kind of what you described around that sort of global expansion. Because actually, if you look at places like Ghana, you know, that nightlife is exactly what London's nightlife looked like 10, 15 years ago, where people stay out till 6 in the morning and, you know, en masse, you know. So what I think is quite interesting is if you have a global strategy, even if your brand's sort of slightly declining in one place, it can be exploding and blowing up in another place. So I love when entrepreneurs talk about that global strategy, because I think it's the way to go. Yeah.
100%. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing hospitality industry today, and how you can emerging entrepreneurs or leaders address it?
I personally think at the moment the biggest challenges to hospitality is just cost inflation across the board. It's like we talked about earlier about this sort of the game has sort of changed. When I started out in 05, you know, it's sort of everything just sort of worked. You know, you knew on your P&L all your metrics, and you know what percentage of your revenue was you know, property costs, what percentage was staff. You know, you knew your margin needs to be, you know, 73% or so. It kind of all made sense. And I think the most difficult things we've got to deal with at the moment are, you know, as we touched on earlier, like energy costs are a problem, and I think that's an absolute failure of the state to plan. I think that sort of thing's unforgivable personally, not getting too far into politics, but you know, we've got, you know, an oil and gas industry off our shoreline that's been mothballed, and we then buy gas from another country, and so, you know, we're not producing the carbon, but we're importing it. So, you know, what have we gained from that? I think, you know, the government have a duty to, you know, create an environment where industry, businesses, and individuals, you know, domestic users as well, have access to cheap, affordable energy. It's fundamental to any economy, and so I think there's been an absolute cock up there, if I may say, bluntly.
We should.
You know, we have the highest electricity prices in Western Europe, I believe. So I mean, that to me is unacceptable, and that's a failure of several governments to plan. So there's that affects us. You've then just got, in general, you know, cost inflation, food inflation. Various reasons for that as well. So anyone going into the business nowadays has to really have a real close eye on their costs, and their conversion and their margins. Managing your stock is critical. So you just have to be really, really on it, because you can't. It's not like it used to be. You could kind of get away with being a bit sloppy. You would say like turnover, 10 million top line. You make $1 million or so on the bottom line without too much sweat. You'd have to really make a mess of it not to make money. Whereas nowadays that kind of 10% sort of average return off your net top line is not there anymore. It's been eaten away by successive national minimum wage rises. The NI rise. The thing I don't sort of understand about it in terms of economically, you constantly up the minimum wage, and the problem you've got is you've then increased the cost of the business. And then the business has to mitigate that, so it puts the prices up, and that in itself is inflation.
Totally.
It's an inflationary measure. And so they're trying to fix the cost of living crisis by giving people more money, which I understand. That makes sense on the surface, but you're not looking at the downstream effects of that decision, which is inflation.
Absolutely.
And so you haven't achieved anything. You've made everyone's groceries more expensive. You made everyone's labour bills more expensive. It's I don't know. I don't see the sense in it.
No, I'm with you.
I'm very sceptical about the direction of this.
Anti-growth. It's anti-growth. It's the opposite of growth. You don't just say the words growth, click your heels and think that that's going to happen. It's talk to business owners about the realities of these decisions, because you're right. We've had quite a lot of guests on. Julian, you've obviously had fixed venues yourself and have one. It's real. This cost that's now attached to your business is very, very real, and it makes it hard, and that's why people moan about the price of a pint. That's the regular,
or anything,
but the reality is it's only going to go one way if these decisions keep being made.
And it's hard as well. We can often be vilified, if in general as ripping people off or whatever. But actually, if you sit down and break down the cost of everything, there is that issue where people can be oversimplistic, and the cost of the pint. People are like, a pint of beer, £8. Of course, that's a lot of money, but you're not paying £8 for the beer. You're paying £8 for the rent, the rates, the utilities, the staff. There's so much more to it. On a pint of beer, a massive chunk of it is duty. It's a direct tax. So you can't blame the operators. They're not as a general rule, we won't charge more than we think we can. It's completely irrational to overcharge, because people simply won't buy your product.
Absolutely.
But so if you see prices going up across the board in the hospitality industry, that's not out of choice.
No.
It's not greed. It's survival.
100%.
That's wicked advice. All right, something for the listeners. What's the best piece of advice you would give to someone starting out in the hospitality business today?
Don't do it. No.
that is a common answer.
A few people say that,
I must say, actually, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about my dad dissuading me from the industry. And to be honest, I've got two sons, Max and Rafa, 13 and 8, and Max came to work at Langan's the last school holiday, and so I did exactly. I mean, I've turned into my father. I did exactly what I did. I put him in a uniform, stuck him in the commie section, and said to the staff, "Treat him like you treat anyone else. No special treatment at all." And he loved it, and and I was horrified.
History is repeating itself.
It's one of those fun industries where anyone that's in it doing well loves it, but if you say to them, "Would you like your children to do it?" they say no. It's and I think it's because it is hard. It is tough. A guy that I respect very much, it has said several times, he says to me, Graziano, there's easier ways to make money. There definitely is, but they're not as fun. And they're not as rewarding, and they're not as sort of life affirming as having these brands and growing and curating them. And so advice on him going into it, you got to. It's tough. It's a tough gig, and that's not me trying to dissuade people from entering the industry, because that's not what I'm saying. But you got to be prepared for it. You know, it's not an easy ride. You've got to be passionate.
Yeah.
I think it's not something you do as a side gig, or you know, as something you just want to try out. I think you've got to really sort of love working with people. I mean, that's one thing that's absolutely key. It's like what is your personality type? You know, some people are not great at engaging with people. They're not personable. They're not social. They can't potentially hide their feelings, or wear the smile when they're not feeling it. If you want to be in hospitality and you're starting from the bottom, you can't have an off day. If you're on the floor, you're serving customers, you smile, you're professional, you hit your standards every time without fail. Doesn't matter if your gerbil died, or your washing machine broke down. It's irrelevant.
So true.
You've got to be on it, and that can be exhausting. Something I used to be quite introverted, and so I think actually the industry is quite good for me, because it forced me to come out of my shell a little bit. I used to be quite shy as a young man, and I think if you can't adapt, I don't think you would enjoy it in the long term, because it can be exhausting. It's because you're acting. If you're naturally vivacious and bright and fun and chatty, then it's easy, that side of the business. I think that's all I would say, is go into it with your eyes open.
Amazing.
It's tough but very rewarding.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Grats, thank you so much. Absolutely amazing guest. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.